Welcome, welcome, welcome. Wow, today is flying by, and you have joined us for our Thought Leadership series. Hopefully, you've been loving SQF Unite so far and making connections, and would love to hear what's resonating most with you. Drop it in the chat. Anyone have a quote from Kevin's incredible keynote this morning that resonated? Personally, I loved his breakthrough question. What can I do to add value to the people I serve with? And I know Kevin mentioned the great John Maxwell, a stellar speaker and leader, who once said that leaders become great not because of their power, but because of their ability to empower others. And we're so glad you've joined us for our Lunch Bites. We'll hear from three awesome speakers and partners that are sponsors, each with Lunch Bite sessions. So presenting Elevating Food Safety Through Digital Pest Management, please welcome Mitch Goldstein of Digital Pest Management of Bayer Crop Science to the virtual stage.
Awesome. Thank you, Rachel. Hey, everybody. Again, my name is Mitchell Goldstein, and I'm with Bayer's Digital Pest Management Group. And today, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about elevating food safety through digital pest management, and a little bit about RMS, our digital pest management solution specifically for rodents. If you could go to the next slide, Mark, sorry. Next slide. So, new century, new tools, digital transformation is really taking over, and Bayer really recognized that in the past 4 or 5 years, and we've developed a solution to help the food industry elevate food safety through digital technology. And as the demands grow, so shouldn't the tools that you all use to help make food safer, protect your brand, and create efficiencies and better decision making. And we'll talk about that a little bit as we go along in the presentation. Next slide, please. So this is where we don't want to be. So we're going to kind of work back. I know some of this may be familiar, hopefully not, probably to very few. But what we want to do is create a pest management service that doesn't allow for these things to happen, to be more proactive, to be more predictive, and to be more integrated into your food safety program. Next slide, Mark. So this is what we call IPM, Integrated Pest Management Program. It's really at the core. Some people have integrated programs now where they actually have an internal service. Some have third-party service providers. We like to work with both, and I think Bayer, we have a very large footprint of installed digital technology specifically for rodent monitoring, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But this is the program. This is where you all want to be, that allows you for maximum flexibility and being able to get that visibility and transparency. But it's also about the data. So having digital technology also allows you to have access to all the data for trending, reporting, and we'll go into that a little bit as we move through. So this is the program, and in the next slide, we'll see how this helps you. So by having an integrated pest management program using digital technologies, it really allows your program to be elevated, your food safety, protecting your brand. It allows you to provide continuous root management analysis, really the flexibility you all need to adjust your program as you go along, and there's new requirements. So just like the pests aren't sleeping, your technology will keep you elevated and ahead of the game. So next slide, please. So this is a statistic that I was really shocked at when I learned. When you have a pest management service, most of the time is spent checking empty traps. And that's an expensive service. And so when you go, next slide, please. So this is actually a great example of how the services change. So if you look to the left, this is what we were talking about earlier. Traditional trap checking service where your technician comes in and they just kind of walk through and check all the traps. Not so enjoyable for them, not really providing that high level of touch, that integrated pest management service that we're talking about. If you look to the right, this is actually a real tracker we put on a technician. And instead of just walking that trap line, spending all their time, they're actually looking into different areas. Locked, so when you have remote monitoring, you can put these devices into hard to reach areas, drop ceilings, locked areas underneath pallets. And so that allows the technician, A, to know everything that's going on before they even walk into your facility, but also to be part of your service, to actually walk through, do that investigation, because that's really where you want it to be. And that's how remote monitoring, electronic monitoring really facilitates and elevates your service. Next slide, please. So now we'll get to a little bit of the rodent monitoring system from Bayer. So as I mentioned earlier, Bayer was asked by service providers over 4 years ago, we see this digital market evolving. Is there something you guys can do to help us, turn this into what we'll call a smart trap? So that's exactly what Bayer's done. And over the past over 4 years, we've installed our rodent monitoring system into all different types of producers, warehouses, distribution centers, really everything along the continuum. Really large organizations, smaller, people that really value their program, want to create flexibility, to elevate the program, to be partners with their service providers so that they can see the data, they know where their facilities are at 24/7, 365 days a year. And so also, just the data becomes important, because not only is it important for the technician who's actually servicing the site, but it's also for the plant manager, for the distribution center manager, for your auditing people, and whether it's internal or external. So there's a lot of people in that continuum that also can have access to this, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Next slide, please. So this is actually a slide of our homepage of the RMS platform, and it's simple to use. It's super intuitive, and you see we have different colors. So red, you could see this right from your phone or from your laptop. So how your one facility is doing, how your multiple facilities. We have this in manufacturers that have facilities that do the manufacturing, the storage of products. So maybe they're not as worried about rodents. They're worried about stored product pests. So they get to see exactly the what condition their system is anytime they want. Just have to be connected to the internet. Next slide, please. And so, reporting. And so once data is digitized, it's digital, you can really slice it, dice it anywhere you want. You could export this information. We automatically create reports for you. Everything is time, date stamped, unchangeable. So everything is, passes, audit standards, and allows you to generate everything push button. So you don't have to rely on those spreadsheets, binders of paper. However you're doing things now, it can be shared. Everything is roles and responsibilities based. So you could have a plant manager or audit person look at maybe 2 or 3 sites, however you want to do it. And these are all things that we help you set up. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go along. Next slide, please. So this slide really is about what we can do when things might be like what we just went through with COVID. When you have remote monitoring in place, you might not be able to have access to the facility. So what we're trying to say here is having a solution like this deployed, not only does it give you the visibility and the data, but it also gives you that peace of mind to be flexible. So if things change, there's a rapid response needed, you have the tools in place to adapt. Next slide, please. And so as I was mentioning earlier, there are folks in the, sort of in the process. And one of those very important is the pest professionals. And I just want to say a little bit about that. Bayer has been in the public health pest management business for many, many years. So a lot of you might be familiar with us from our traditional products, our chemical products. And so we like to partner with pest professionals. They could be an internal program, it could be external. We have relationships with many of them. So in this process, we have a customer success team that actually works with you, works with your service provider, and does all the setup, training, is there for ongoing questions, and helps you to get the most out of the system. So you're never really on it alone. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. If you go to the next slide, please. And so, just here you can see it's really just a couple components. There's what we call a sensor that goes on the rodent trap. We can monitor inside and outside, wash down areas, outside in bait stations. So we actually can give you a complete view of rodent activity inside and outside your facility. We have growers that were having problems with rodents getting into their, high value trees and ornamentals, and they had no idea exactly where they were coming from. So they actually put our solution out into the fields, and they create a map using all that digital data. We do that within our system, so they know exactly now where to spend that time to minimize the rodent problem. And then we also have to the right is what we call a gateway, and the gateways can be internal, and we also have these external, completely weatherproof. I think the only one on the marketplace where if you have a campus, or if you have a large facility, you can put our gateways outside and you can have complete coverage. And then we go back through an encrypted cellular communications network that we manage with a national service provider to our application, which is on top of Microsoft Azure, completely secure based on all of Microsoft's security protocols. So all your data is yours. And next slide, please. And so just in a closing, what we're seeing is folks that want to take the leap. And what we say is start with a very high value facility. And we have a program that allows you to try it. Again, we'd like to partner either with your internal folks, your internal pest management program, or your service provider. But it really starts with a discussion. And we would like to have that conversation with you all. So I really encourage you to reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn. My email, mitchell.goldstein@bayer.com. We're here to educate, help you learn. And that's what we say, because digital means different things. There's different things that each program values. And by trying it, you get to understand what it means to you. And we can help educate. We can provide the data from other customers to help you. And that's really a quick nutshell, in a nutshell. And I wish you all a great rest of the day. And thanks so much for your time. And Rachel, back to you.
Bravo, Mitch. I loved it. And you know what? Thanks for the call out. Find our speakers on LinkedIn. Let's give it up for Mitch in the chat one more time. And when you think about digital, it's interesting that you bring that to pest management. I'll be thinking about that as we know that data tells patterns, it predicts the future. Mitch, you're a great partner to have. And you know what? I'm excited to introduce our next partner and sponsor speaker presenting his session, Sustainability and Food Safety, Finding the Right Balance. Please welcome Chris Middleton of Bureau Veritas. Chris?
Thank you very much, Rachel. Appreciate that. Mitch, great job. It's fantastic to see the digital solutions come into fruition. I remember sitting with Bayer when this first order was running out. So great job on that front. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to come out and listen to me talk a bit about sustainability, a real big hot topic in the industry right now. So I am Chris Middleton. I'm the North American Food Program Manager here at Bureau Veritas Certification North America. What I'm looking forward to is just really talking to you about how are we going to be able to intertwine this new push for sustainability that we have into our food safety management systems and what we need to do. So let's move forward with our next slide and take a look at what our topics. I really got a small amount of time. This is something that we could talk about for hours. But really wanted to chunk things into 3 parts for you here. Let's take a look at what some of the sustainability initiatives that we're looking at. What are some of the items that are out in the industry and what we need to look at? How specifically does that relate to food safety? How can we intertwine that potentially, or what do we need to look at and consider as we're looking at food safety management systems? And then finally, some action points for you. What do you have to do for your facilities, your sites, as you move forward in your goal for a sustainable system or a sustainable approach to the manufacture, the distribution, the growing of food products and that. So let's move forward into our next slide. And then looking at our nice little beautiful picture with what our sustainability initiatives are. So on our next one, we're going to see a little bit of an example of what we need to consider here and what's going on. There is a push globally. This isn't just something that we like to talk about in one market. This is a global conference that we're looking at. We are trying to pull everybody here, and it is a hot topic across everywhere and affects all areas in the food chain. So from farm to fork. So this needs to be considered. So our farmers, our growers, our fishers, our aquaculturalists, sorry about that, and everybody within food services. So we're talking about our distributors, our manufacturers. Our next session is going to be on packaging with my friends from Eagle Certification. Our food packaging people have to be considerate about this stuff as well. And really, we want to look at what do we need to do to be good stewards of the earth? How do we ensure that we hand off a better world for our children and our children's children as we move forward? So what can we do not only as consumers of those products, but also as people within the supply chain? How do we ensure that we hand it off and understand that some of these resources to a level are finite and aren't going to proliferate? And how do we ensure ongoing sustainability as we move forward? Part of that too is looking at ethical behaviors. Obviously ties in. Some of this has been around for some time. We have been looking at things like animal welfare. We are well aware of the ethical standards that exist out there within the industry, but that is going to be part of your sustainability initiatives as you're moving through. And something that we really want to look at with these pushes towards sustainability is ensuring that we protect the food system as well. How do we promote food safety, food security, and a resilient system that can be repeatable for years and years and years and doesn't impact things? So that's something that we want to look at. As we move to our next slide, gives you kind of an example of some certifications that you can look at, but also looking at the impacts and the interactions between all the different areas that exist here. We can see some examples of things like RSPO. We can look at some ISO standards that do exist, and you can see some items that are recyclables that will move forward, but also renewables that do exist, and some of the things that take some time and what we need to consider moving forward. So as we move through to our next slide, I don't want to kind of spend too much time on this. Let's talk about the guts of our presentation. What do we really need to focus on here? What are the food safety impacts? So as we kind of move forward within the presentation to our next slide, let's take a look at what it is that we need here. And I want you to kind of take a step back first, and I want you to kind of look at 3 things. Let's kind of chunk our items into 3 areas. So what are we doing on the processing side? And when I'm talking processing, all my people that are on the growing side that are pre-farm gate, please, I apologize, but I am including you within that group. But what are we doing to manage these items to ensure we have a sustainable resource on that side? How do we ensure that we're not impacting the environment in a negative way and ensuring that those sort of applications don't impact food safety? There's a big push for reusing water. There's a big push for decreasing greenhouse gas. That's what GHG stands for there. How are we ensuring that it doesn't impact things? Fertilizer sourcing is an important one as well that we're looking at, and we need to consider what are the potential impacts with using that as we move forward on that side of things. One thing that's extremely important within sustainability side of things is the traceability function. A lot of us may have heard about a recent company within the United States that was very big within the sustainability sector, had a number of restaurants, had a number of retail outlets that basically has almost gone into non-existence because of some food fraud considerations that weren't really looked at. They had some mislabeling, they had some issues with tracing those products and concerns. So really super important for you to be thinking about traceability on this side as we're moving forward. There needs to be confidence within the system and the considerations that you're looking at and knowing where you're getting it from. This is already built in the code. I'm already talking about stuff that we're well aware of that has been established for some times, but has been expanded within edition 9, within the quality code as well, and been talked about a bit more to push this through and making sure that you're focusing on it to protect your brand on the sustainable side and the food safety side. And we want to ensure that the consumer ultimately has confidence in our products and in our system. And then finally, looking at those recyclables. I remember growing up as a boy in Toronto, it was pushed, reduce, reuse, recycle. We learned about that all the time. We still have that pushing today, and we're finally seeing it start to really get into the food safety management systems, into the food safety manufacturing side, into food packaging. Years and years ago, I don't think we would have ever talked about primary packaging, packaging that touches food product to be manufactured from recycled materials. That is something that we didn't hear. We're starting to see bottling operations that are manufacturing bottles from recycled resins, which is fantastic, decreasing that plastic consumption, decreasing the potential of the microplastic that occurs out there. Looking at a move to metals being used a bit more, even in things like waters and that we didn't see in the past. So really kind of exciting time on things. And how are we decreasing the amount of stuff that we're sending off to landfills that's just going to sit there? We only have a certain amount of area in this world that we can put things in, and we want to make sure that we're limiting that impact. So as we kind of move to our next slide, we're going to start to look at what does it mean for you? What do we need to look at? So we talked a bit about greenhouse gases there a bit. So we're starting to see, looking at how can we decrease the amount of energy that we're using. So we're seeing a change in, are we able to adjust cooking times? Are we able to adjust cooling times? Do we have to use processing aids to modify systems to decrease that greenhouse gas, to decrease the energy use that could be used on that side? So we got to make sure that we're taking a look at that as we move through, as we make those adjustments. So rather large situation that occurred many years ago with an adjustment in cooking times. If we looked at it, that caused a bit of a problem with E. coli and things along those lines. So you need to consider that as we're looking at it as we move through. Talked a bit about recycled materials. We're starting to see that really get pushed forward. We're starting to see that you have to not only the use of it, but how as a manufacturer or a grower or a farmer or a distributor are you managing those materials in your facility to be recycled as well? Need to make sure that we're looking at it on that side. You already know that within the food safety code for manufacturing and the other codes that exist, there is discussion already about the use of waste for animal feed. Really important, because what we can do is we can have a lot of the food waste, we can then send that off for further use. Obviously, something that we really want to look at, decrease that amount that goes out to the recycling. Does not impact the earth, but also is effective within the management system that exists and within the food chain on that front. But we want to ensure that it doesn't pose a risk. So if we are receiving those items, but if we're also sending those items out, they don't pose a risk and that we're managing it on that side of things. And probably one of the main things you want to be looking at as we're looking at here in impacts is fraud. What happens with a lot of these things? We have a label claim. What happens when we have a claim that exists? It ends up being more of value. What does that look like now? It looks like we have the potential for people to try and push conventional items being specialty items on that front. So maybe they want to say things are RSPO, if we're looking at things like that for responsibly sourced palm oil. Is that not within that area? Is it mislabeled to look at that front? There's obviously been challenges that we've seen in the labeling on things when it comes to organics, and obviously challenges within the fishery world on that side with people improperly labeling things. So this does potentially expose you to some risks on that front. So on both sides, as a manufacturer receiving those raw materials coming in, but also as a user, if you're bringing in those products to eat as a consumer, you could be concerned with that on that side of things. So as we move forward, let's see what that does mean on our side. So what you do want to look at, and I want you to take this away, is remember you have a system. The SQF standard is a food safety management system and a quality management system. Please understand that. It is a systematic approach. Remember the plan, do, check, act cycle, if I'm telling you anything, when you're looking at stuff. So please remember, if you make an adjustment in one area, it could have ripple effects in other areas. You have to make sure you look at the choices that you make, the impacts that could occur, and what you need to modify in all areas, because it can cause an issue for you on that side. So let's move forward, and let me give you some items of action, things that you can take forward to move on that front. So let's move to the, and you could skip this slide because we got some sand looking good. Talking about a 4-step approach that you want to look at, the main thing I want you to take away from here is that last column, looking at that plan, do, check, act cycle. So remember, you need to focus on these items. You need to make sure you're looking at those changes that you're making for sustainability, for ethical sourcing reasons, to build trust. You need to see what needs to be done in your system to ensure that that continues moving forward and that food safety and food quality is not compromised as you make those changes. We cannot compromise food safety. We will not have any clients if they're all sick all the time or they're dead. We don't want to see that. We have to make sure that as priority, we have to ensure we have a food safety culture, we have a quality culture in place, and that has to be included within these sustainability initiatives. So please ensure that you remember that. So let's move forward, and I'm going to leave you with the big three, I'm going to call it. So some big chunks that I want to look at. So as an auditor, first thing I always start off with is I always look at a facility's food safety plan and HACCP plan, regardless of the audit. That's my number one thing. That's everything that have Bureau Veritas certification. We tell all of our auditors, that's the first thing that you need to go do. That's the first thing we expect you to go do. Why is that important? Because that gives you a good idea on the entire system and the risks and threats that have been looked at. So make sure that you are looking at this. You are diving into how your HACCP plan and or food safety plan has to be adjusted because of these sustainability efforts that are being taken. Do you just need to adjust something on the raw material side? Are there new hazards that exist? Do we need to look at things like food frauds and things like that, which we'll talk about in a second? Are there potential chemical risks that exist? Because maybe we're using new processing aids that are of concern. Maybe we're using recycled materials that are of a concern. So you need to make sure you dive into that and detail it as you're looking at it on that side of things. The next one is I want to make sure that you look at that vulnerability assessment. Remember, we are not just looking at vulnerability assessments once a year. Just because the standard, just because the code says things have to be done at least annually, you need to be looking at this every single time a change is made. Remember, 2.5, we're talking about our validation and verification areas. If you're making changes that impact the food safety management system, ensure that you're validating that that change does not compromise food safety in any way. So really make sure you're looking at your food fraud and your vulnerability program, because as you are bringing in these items that do have some sort of form of label declaration, that do have some form of certification, you need to make sure you look at how are we ensuring that there is trust there and we are not compromising the safety on that side of things. We need to make sure that we have the proper certifications for the sites that we're getting information from, and we adjust our food fraud program and our control measures appropriately. And then the last one I want everybody to step back and look at and really sit down and focus where you're at today. Because this is probably one of the ones that we can do without a certification. We can start looking at is waste handling programs. So big challenge that I see sometimes when we're handling animal feed waste is the site not understanding we can't have foreign materials, we can't have non-consumables for the animals in there. It cannot pose a risk to animals. So we need to make sure that we are ensuring that it does not pose a risk on that front. Do we adjust it properly? Do we provide the proper training? Are we explaining this to our employees properly and the impacts that it has? Because I find that that is a gap that we have on that side. The employees need to be aware of why we're making these sustainability pushes and the importance and where sustainability fits into there. And an easy one here is waste handling programs. So how are we handling that animal feed waste? What are we doing with recyclables? Do people understand how they're going to be doing it? All of us travel here. We've all been to the airport many times. We've all seen how many airports have set up their recyclable containers and their waste containers, and people just throw them in there. They throw anything out in each can. We want to make sure that we're not doing that if we have that sustainability push. So how are we ensuring that we go through it on that front? And looking at recycled water. I think you're going to start to see more and more and more people moving forward with looking at recycled water. How do we treat that water so we can bring it back into the system on that front? And I know that there's a number of companies that already do that. So really, those are the three action points that I want you to take away if you're looking at anything right now. But be sure, remember, plan, do, check, act cycle. What are the impacts of sustainability across the food safety system? What do I have to adjust? What do I have to consider? And really make sure that we continue to be good stewards of the earth and don't let this chase you away from moving forward with these sustainability initiatives that are coming up. So with that, I want to thank everybody. Please come visit us at the booth. I've got a LinkedIn page. I've got an email. I don't think I got a next slide. I think I've either forgot to put it in or it got deleted out for the next one. But reach out to us. We're here to help you with anything at Bureau Veritas certification. With that, I'm going to hand you back to Rachel. Thank you so much, everybody, for your time. Enjoy the conference. Loved it. So cheers.
Cheers. Thank you so much, Chris. Let's hear it for Chris in the chat. I could feel his energy radiating off the screen. So, Chris, I love it. And thank you so much for sharing your info. You know, Mitch's session, Chris's session, and as we roll into our third, I'm not going to lie, this might be the most productive lunch I've had in a while. And the knowledge keeps on coming with our next and final session of today's Lunch Bites, presenting food packaging do's and don'ts to protect your brand and consumers. Please join me in welcoming Ann Cooper and Joe Wieland of Eagle Certification Group. Welcome.
Thanks, Rachel. Hey, everybody. I'm Ann Cooper with Eagle Certification Group. We are a certification body, and we are among the biggest in the world that audits food packaging manufacturers. And so we are here today to take a look at a sample of packaging defects and understand which components of food packaging are monitored at the food packaging manufacturing plant to ensure the safety of your food item when you put it in that package. And then Joe is also going to review a simple process to manage packaging changeovers that ensure that product accuracy relative to the spec and the order requirements while achieving compliance with SQF Packaging Code Edition 9. So without any further delay, I'd like to briefly introduce Joe Wieland, an Eagle packaging auditor expert who's been auditing third-party SQF packaging plants since 2008. So if I count right and I run out of fingers, it's because it's 13 years he's been doing this, and also ISO 9001. And before auditing, Joe was a project manager in research and development at Procter & Gamble in paper and flexible film packaging. So Joe has a lot of wealth of information to share with you, and I'm excited to open the floor to Joe and let him run with it. Thanks, Joe.
All right, thanks, Ann. Wow, this conference is just crazy good. I mean, I can't get over how much I'm learning from all these speakers. You never know what these are going to be like, but this is just off the wall great. As Ann mentioned, my name is Joe Wieland. I'm the president and owner of Wieland Consulting, which is established in 1998. I'm a lead SQF auditor for the Eagle Certification Group. And when we got to talking about doing this, and me being a packaging guy for many years, we thought, this would really be appropriate to maybe provide a very small sample of what the packaging industry is doing to protect food. Most folks outside of the packaging industry really don't get exposed to the work that goes into making safe food packaging that allows the effort that the foodies are doing to stay, for their products to stay safe and well protected throughout its shelf life. Next slide, please. So what we're going to look at is just a few packaging defects, and then I'll talk about 4 proven best practices when it comes to product changeover. Rather than talk about defects, we thought we would show you defects. So if you'll take a look at this first slide here, a lot of us are in plastic packaging, so we'll get started with plastic right off the top. The top image there shows what's called shorts. When you hear the defect is shorts, what the container is missing is the top edge of the cup where the sealing is required. It's basically short of material. And this is a food safety risk that affects closure sealability. The photo below that is burns. This is a discoloration of the closure. And it's a visual defect that may or may not be considered a food safety issue, but is always considered a quality defect that cannot be shipped. As noted, burns can result from a lack of heat control and the mold dwell time and air issues within the cavity itself. Next slide, please. Here's a couple more plastic molding defects. This is Flash. Excuse me. This is flash. This defect may look like shorts, but it's more widespread around the sealing surface of the container, possibly caused by mold temperature, extruder pressures, and gates within the mold that allow too much molten plastic to squeeze out of the mold, and it creates gaps around the top edge. Flash presents a food safety issue as sealing is compromised. The lower photo is a little difficult to see, but you can see some dark spots on there. We're all familiar with contamination coming from foreign matter, but in the plastics industry and packaging industry, contamination in the plastic packaging can also come from dirty regrind material, the purging of resin in the extruder not being effectively removed, and possibly resin hopper contamination. Let's go to the next slide. Here we have some ink and print defects. Printing defects can be categorized as a quality defect or a food safety defect, especially when the ingredient panel becomes illegible or smeared. Now think about nested printed cups where the ink on the outside comes in contact with the inside or food contact surfaces. So nesting of printed cups where the ink is not adequately cured is a risk when printing ink transferred to the food contact surface of the container. The plastic, all plastic must be prepared somehow to accept ink. It's a tough surface to print on, but there are several surface treatments that includes the control of ink viscosity, drying time, and curing time for the ink. There are many variables to control and countless checks and tests that take place to ensure that the printed packages match the artwork and that it's legible. Next slide. This is one we probably have not seen before, but these are metal can defects. We all eat out of cans at some point. Bending and coating tin into a food safe product has been going on for decades, and much of the equipment used to produce cans and lids are still in use after many, many years. Food safety for metal cans is all about the integrity of the bottom seal, side seal, top seal, welded or fold seal, and the coating on the inside of the can. Coatings, where required, are all FDA approved. They come with a letter of guarantee. And cans are constantly and consistently tested for seal leaks, pinholes during the entire production run. The images that you're looking at here, the one directly below metal can packaging, shows actually a defective seal where the side of the can is not nested completely into the crimped top. This is what's known as a false seam. By the eye, you would see this as being maybe acceptable, but under further examination, the lower photo shows that you do not have a seal, so therefore you have the opportunity for air to get into the product or for product to get out of the can. The lower photo is an example of a poor coating application. You can kind of see the streaks in there. The false seam and the coating defects are also considered food safety issues. Next slide. Paper packaging. Paper packaging is used extensively, direct contact. In the fast food business is both direct food contact or secondary packaging. Now, we all think that paper is easy to seal. We've all glued paper together with our stick of glue, or we glued something together that was paper. But because of various surface characteristics of paper that could include metallized paper, wax paper, clay-coated paper, and now recycled paper, these surfaces present a bit of a challenge to print on and difficult to seal to ensure food safety where required. The paper packaging industry has a vast array of tests that are performed to ensure that printing and sealability are achieved. Just some of those verifications include bond strength, COF, coating weight, compression strength, drop test, dye penetration, edge crush, flat crush. The list goes on and on. I've only captured a few of them here, but all of these tests take place in paper packaging companies. Next slide, please. The glass bottle folks that are producing actual glass bottles has done an exceptionally good job of defining both critical defects and major defects. This slide shows a combination of both critical and major defects. Depending on the defect type, these could be food or quality defects. But I especially like the creative names that they've given to some of these defects, like the choke bore and the freak and stuck plugs. They've got some great names for their defects. There are, in doing some research, there are several glass bottle websites that provide bottle defect definitions via descriptions, along with possible root causes and remedies to correct the nonconformance. There's a lot of good information on glass bottle defects and the glass bottle industry and those organizations that fill glass containers. And I work with some wineries that are constantly examining glass bottles. They are highly sensitized to food safe packaging. Next slide, please. Over the years of doing both quality and food safety, I spent a lot of time on the floor watching things like packaging changeovers. I especially like to be on the floor when a packaging changeover is taking place. And there's 4 well-defined steps that companies follow that mitigate any risk of mixed loads, wrong product, wrong artwork, etc. And I'm going to share them with you. These are not mine. These are things that I've observed over 41 years of being a packaging guy. The first step is the line clear process, 2612 in the packaging 9.0. Old product removed, including non-conforming product bins at the line. Housekeeping is performed around the line and inside of the safe processing areas of the line. Completed paperwork is checked for accuracy and removed from the line. The operative word being removed from the line. The changeover from product A to product B is recorded and authorized by a line lead or a supervisor. Step 2 then is cleaning and sanitation. The line is down. What better time to do cleaning and sanitation? In some industries, that could be a blow off, a wipe down, a cleaning, a sanitizing of food contact surfaces, along with an acknowledgement by a line lead or supervisor as being acceptable. And that is a requirement that we have a second set of eyes look at that. Step 3 is new order verification. Now we can make the assumption that everything is gone, the line is clear, it's ready for production. The new order verification then documents the new raw materials via formal verification of inks, resin, board, coating, artwork, packaging materials, pallet layout, and label placement on the finished containers, something we don't always get right. A documented label verification by comparing the label information to the work order specifications and recording that label verification has passed. Sometimes we don't find evidence of a label verification. The work order packet, the entire packet, then is verified to confirm that all the required information is present and complete. I've been on a printing press when there wasn't a color standard in the work order packet. I'm going, what are you going to make here? And how are you going to print to meet standard? And then another step that I don't always see is that the process settings are verified for rates, temperatures, pressures, all the other things that go into producing the new product. And then the fourth and final step is the first article approval. When I don't see a first article approval, I get worried because I'm not sure who's turning on the green light here to start producing 1 million of this or 1 million of that. So the first article approval then consists of a product, approval of the product, the pallet layout, and the shipping labels upon completion of the very first palletized load. So nothing leaves the production area to go to the warehouse until this verification is done. And it's not just a first article approval of the product, it's the entire load going into the warehouse. That then gets approved by an operator and a second authorized person. So next slide, please. So the do's and don'ts and takeaways, I think, from this portion of our segment is that the SQF food packaging companies, they really care about the safety of food. They are controlling hundreds and hundreds of packaging variables, just like the food producers. Right now, they are really struggling with supply chain issues driven by the pandemic. Anything that's petrochemical based, which is resin, is tough to get. Supplies, bags, cartons, containers, so on and so forth, packaging materials, tough to get, long lead times. And they consistently verify and validate their processes to mitigate the risk of a recall due to packaging performance. As far as managing the changeover takeaways, I think if you build these 4 routine steps that we shared into every job change, you will mitigate risk, which is really what all of us SQF people are all about. So I'm going to turn this back over to Ann for any comments she might have, and or Rachel. And I wanted to say, Chris, great job with your presentation. So I'll turn it back over to Chris, or turn it back over to Ann.
The SQF code in packaging is really helping folks to avoid issues like recalls, right? By that verification of first article and all the 4 steps you take. Those are all code element requirements. And if not followed properly, it could lead to big, expensive issues, right, Joe?
You bet. You bet. It's simple stuff. And if it's all there, it works. It really does work.
And where in the step is the part where you have to verify that if they're using recycled paper products to help with sustainability, like Chris mentioned in his presentation, how do you verify that the recycled content is safe for food contact?
This is a great question that I am currently researching to see at what level we can get to, because there's a company up in Green Bay, Wisconsin, that's currently working on post-consumer recyclability to build back into paper products. And they happen to make plates, paper plates, and paper cups. So those kind of products will have to be looked at more closely. And we're hoping that that material can be looked at by the FDA as we do other direct contact materials. So I don't have a clear answer for you, but hopefully somebody on this conference or in one of the other sessions will be able to add some additional perspective to that.
Excellent. And what do you think would be the one takeaway point you'd like people to go away with as the most important component in food packaging?
I think for me, it's always validation. Is that process delivering what it's intended to do? And we get the 2 V's always mixed up, verification and validation. But validation is the actual act of having criteria and being able to grade whether that particular process is delivering what it's supposed to be delivering.
Great. That's a good wrap up, Joe. Thank you so much. And you'll see another opportunity to meet with Joe and I tomorrow at the Knowledge Swap for the packaging group, FSC 27. We're group number 3 from 2:15 to 3:15 tomorrow. So thank you very much, Joe, for sharing your expertise today with us. And thank you for being a valued member of the Eagle Certification Group auditing team. Rachel, I'll turn it back over to you. Thanks.
Thanks, Anne. And thank you so much, Joe. We'll definitely be keeping our two V's straight. And you've given us a lot to think of. I just want to shout out all of our incredible speakers, Mitch, Chris, and Joe. Thank you. Let's hear it again in the chat. We had a great lunch together, tons of knowledge sharing. I hope you've got your notebooks filled. Now, make sure that you are connecting with our speakers, whether going to the community exchange or connecting with them through the attendees app. They're here to serve you. And I know that's a little different because you're busy serving others all day, but they're here to serve you. Request a meeting, ask a question. And let's keep up the great chat interaction. I am loving it. I just want to shout out some of my friends out there, Keaton and Leslie, Crystal, John, Jose, Sarah, Adam, Wanda, my friend, Marlene, Jeffrey, Kristen, Kelsey, Shalonda, Arlen, Zinmei, Teresa, Jennifer. I see you. Okay. We all see you. We truly get better together. And our next sessions, well, they are waiting with even more education in this afternoon's education sessions and Ask the Expert sessions. You can check it all out on the Learn Engage tab. And don't forget, 3 p.m. Eastern, the SQFI Town Hall and SQF Excellence Awards. Still ahead on day one, right here at SQF Unites 2021. Now go ahead, click into your next sessions on the Learn and Engage page or your schedule, and let's keep the fun going.